We're trying this a different way tonight, so let's hope this works. We are on page 51 of Moon Over Manifest, and we're going to start with Miss Sadie's Divining Parlor. We talked about this before we left for spring break and then didn't get to go back, but a divining parlor is a fancy way of saying like a fortune teller. So Mr. Lazalier is playing the part of the fortune teller tonight. That may be a little too creepy.
I'm getting into it.
Okay.
I'm making the part my own.
Okay. All right. We're going to let you make it your own then.
Please.
May 29th, 1936. After tossing and turning most of the night, I imagine I looked a bit puny the next morning. Shady gave me a sideways look as he doled out a hot bowl of cream of wheat at the far end of the bar. I skimmed off a spoonful and blew on it, waiting for it to cool. I glanced behind him and noticed a bottle of amber liquid tucked up on a shelf. Having been raised around men who were down on their luck, I was no stranger to the sight of alcohol. There was only the one bottle and it was full. I guessed it made sense to have a little hooch in a saloon, even if it was part church. So I'm sure you can infer that hooch is slang for alcohol. You had a couple of callers yesterday. Did they find you in the treehouse? Oh, Letty and Ruth Ann? I tried to sound casual. Yes, they stopped to visit a while. I didn't think he'd take too kindly to the nighttime activities. And judging Ruth Ann's and Letty's talk, I figured their folks would be even less receptive. Let's see, they're cousins. They'd be Nora's and Betty's girls, those Wallace girls. Their mothers used to get into all kinds of mischief when they were young. I guess they were getting their comeuppances now, Shady said with a grin. My dad used to always tell me that when my boys got bigger, I would pay for my raisin, meaning that I was a difficult child. Can't imagine that at all. But that I was a difficult child, and that when I had kids, he hoped they'd be difficult so that I would know what he went through. So that's what he means by they're getting their comeuppances. I wondered if he knew about the mischief that had gone on the night before. There's an old shed that's fallen down behind McGregor's place. I'm going over to gather up some scrap wood. You're welcome to come along. Thank you, but I'll stay here and clean up the breakfast dishes. Gideon says I'm supposed to be a help, not a burden. Never you mind about that, but all right then, I'll be back around noon. We're having church services here tonight, followed by a potluck dinner. Be sure to invite your friends. Tell them we'd be pleased to have them. It was flattering, but Shady was highly overestimating my circle of friends. It looks to be a hot one today. Putting on a hat that seemed to have long ago lost its shape, he stepped outside and peered into the cloudless sky. He lifted the handles of a wheelbarrow and started off. That put an idea into my head, and I mulled it over while washing the dishes and wiping down the bar top. If he was trying to get his outside chores done early, maybe that Miss Sadie would be off doing the same and wouldn't come back till noon. This was my chance to get my compass back without risking loss of limb or soul. My rag caught on a crack in the bar top. At first I thought it was just a split in the wood, but looking closer, I could see that the top of the bar was a movable panel. I pulled on it, and with hardly any effort, the whole section moved forward and then down. Another panel taking its place on the top like the first one had never been there. My washcloth had disappeared underneath without a trace. The word speakeasy sprung to mind, I can tell you. Go ahead and underline speakeasy on page 53. That's another one of your vocabulary words. And in the PowerPoint that we watched about the Roaring 20s, we learned about speakeasies and how Alcohol was illegal during Prohibition, so they would have these speakeasies where you had to know the password and come in, and it was basically a club that you could go to, but they could have it all put away in the matter of seconds if the police were to come. So that bar top played a large part. Those are the places all over the country where folks sell and drink bootlegged alcohol and hope not to get caught by the law. I've heard tell they have secret entryways with passwords to get in, and once you're inside, they've got all kinds of hidden panels and quick hiding spots so they can stash their liquor in case there's a raid by the police. Still, I thought it strange that in Shady's whole establishment, I hadn't seen but one bottle of liquor, and it was sitting right out in the open. This was something to ponder. But for now, I was wasting the cool of the morning. I hung the dish towel on its hook and headed down the path to perdition. Miss Sadie's place wasn't quite as scary in the daylight. It had gone from being a full-fledged den of iniquity to a sorry excuse for a house. Grass and weeds snuck their way up through the saggy porch and all around the sides of the house, giving it the scruffy look of a week-old beard. If this was a ghost house, it looked like that ghost had lost his job and all his savings along with the rest of the country. With not a breath of wind to be had, the chimes hung in silent disregard. I gauged I could be up and down those porch steps, compass in hand, in 5 seconds. That is, I could have if the compass had still been hanging there, but it was gone.
Bum, bum, bum.
Maybe she'd moved it. As I tiptoed up the rotting stairs, they creaked and groaned, cussing me for stepping on their aching backs. Go ahead and underline. You knew it was coming. As I tiptoed up the rotting stairs, they creaked and groaned, cussing me for stepping on their aching backs. This is an example of, do you know?
Why no, Miss Laz, I don't.
Personification.
Personification, of course.
Of course. Giving human qualities and characteristics to non-human items. So the stairs can't really cuss her or have aching backs, but they are giving them the personality of a human.
Obviously, you don't speak stair.
I don't speak stair. In the dusty window, a faded sign read, "Insights from the Beyond, Miss Sadie Redison, Medium." There was no compass to be found outside, and the house looked deserted. The screen door had a yellowed index card stuck in the wire mesh that said, "Enter." I reached into my pocket, felt my 2 dimes, and tried to decide which one would give me the best answer. I chose one and flipped it. Heads, I'd go home. Tails, I'd go in. Tails. That dime was a dud. I switched to the other one. Tails again. Darn it all. The air in Miss Sadie's parlor was hot and thick. I thought sitting on one of those red velvety couches chock full of fringy pillows was probably akin to suffocating. Go ahead and underline it. I thought sitting on one of those red velvety couches chock full of fringy pillows was probably akin to suffocating. A comparison, sitting on the couch, to suffocating, not using like or as. So instead of a simile, we have a...
I don't know, Miss Laz.
Metaphor.
Metaphor.
Still, I had to find my compass. I took a deep breath and ventured around the room. Suddenly, the double doors of the parlor whooshed open. A large, fleshy woman stood before me in full regalia. Her eyes were all made up, earrings and bracelets jangling. The sign in the window said, "Miss Sadie was a medium." From the look of her, I'd say that was a bit wishful. So a play on words here. Medium is someone who tries to communicate with people from beyond the grave. And so that's called a medium. Well, she takes it to mean that that's her size. And obviously this lady is not a...
She's an El Grande.
She's an El Grande, not a medium, exactly. And when it says she was in full regalia, think Fancy Nancy. She was made up.
Lots of makeup, lots of dangles, lots of big clothing.
And I would pay good money to see you in that.
Well, all right. How much?
Well, I don't have much.
Then no. I don't come cheap.
The heavy red dress she wore brushed across the floor, tossing up dust as she hobbled to an ornate chair behind a round table. She seemed to have a bad leg and took some time squeezing herself between the arms of the chair. Thinking she hadn't seen me, I turned to make a clean getaway. "Sit down," she said, her voice thick and savory, like goulash. She put her hands flat on the table. "Let us see if today the spirits are willing to speak." Suddenly, it became clear. A diviner, a medium. This woman was a fortune teller and a spirit conjurer, if you believed in that sort of thing. I stood near the front door. "I'm not here for..."
Silencio!
"Silence." She held out a hand. I don't think she's Silencio. Is that Italian? I don't think she's Italian.
It's just for effect.
Oh,
go with it.
She held out a hand, motioning me to the chair across from her. I sat. She slid a cigar box across the table. I almost told her no thank you, but then I saw the little slot cut into the lid. Now, I didn't usually have 2 coins to rub together, and when I did, I was real slow to part with them. But if this was the only way to get my compass back, I guessed I'd have to go along with it. I dropped in a dime. Miss Sadie peered inside the box and slid it back to me. She tapped her fingers on the table. "Today is hot. The spirits are reluctant." I wondered if her divining abilities allowed her to see the other coin in my pocket. I might be wanton enough to risk eternal damnation on Miss Sadie's spiritualism, but I'd be hung if I'd waste another dime. She's not giving her second dime. "But you can tell the spirits it ain't getting any cooler." I pushed that cigar box back. She heaved a sigh so heavy it might have been mistaken for a dying breath. "Very well. What is it you want?
Stand by. The St. John helicopter is passing overhead."
"Very well. What is it you want? Your fortune? Your future?" I squirmed, not knowing what to say. She peered at me hard and asked again, "What do you seek?" Maybe it was the way she studied me so hard that made me feel like she could see right through me to the brocade wallpaper behind me. I didn't know what made me say what I said next, and I wasn't quite sure what I meant by it. It just came out. "I'm looking for my daddy." Her eyebrows went up. "I see. Now we get somewhere. Do you have a bauble?" "Bauble? A totem, a trinket, something your father may have touched." She puckered her lips, and her already wrinkled face drew into more wrinkles. She probably knew darn good and well I was missing Gideon's compass, and I wasn't parting with any more money. Besides, she was just an old woman full of beans anyway, so I decided to call her bluff. I pulled out the letter from Ned to Jinx that was folded in my back pocket. If Miss Sadie came up with some cock and bull story about my daddy from something that wasn't his, I'd know she was as phony as a 2-headed nickel. I slid the paper over to her. Miss Sadie opened it, smoothed the yellowed paper beneath her fleshy palms. As she looked at the words, her hands began to tremble. She held them to her face, and her breath came out in short, shuddering gasps. For a minute, I couldn't decide if she was crying or dying, but then figured this must be part of her divining preparations. Finally, she lifted her head and touched the letter again. gently stroking the page with her palm as if she was trying to draw the words into herself. "The letter," she said, without looking at me. "It mentions certain mementos. You have these?" There was something deep and old in her voice. It sounded like need. I remembered that the letter mentioned the silver dollar, the fishing lure, and the skeleton key. "I found them in a Lucky Bill cigar box under a loose floorboard," I answered a little too quickly, and it made me sound guilty. "There was other stuff too," I continued, over-explaining, "an old cork and a tiny wooden baby doll no bigger than a thimble, and all painted up in bright colors." I wished I could shut myself up. After a long pause, she rested her gaze on me, puckering her lips again in thought. She seemed to be weighing whether to go on, as if deciding if I was worthy of receiving her divination. "Very well. Place your hands on the table. I will build a bridge between the world of the living and the dead." "But my daddy's alive," she said, figuring she'd just given herself away as a fake. "The lines between the living and the dead are not always clear." She closed her eyes and breathed slow and deep. I closed one eye and peeked out of the other. "It is time to reveal secrets of future and past. I see a boy from long ago," she began. "He is on a train." So far, I wasn't impressed. "The boy, he is a stranger to manifest." "Where is he now?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Silence! The spirits will not be rushed." Miss Sadie was working up a sweat. I'd had no idea it took such effort being a spirit conjurer. I started wide-eyed as the diviner began.
"The boy, he is tired and hungry. He must act now. He must make a leap of faith."
All right, that's it for now. We'll be back soon. Bye.